You are listening to Real Men Feel with Andy Grant. Real Men Feel encourages men to allow and express all of their emotions. Despite what you may have been taught, all emotions do serve you. Real Men Feel is committed to engaging in discussions that most men aren't having, but all men can benefit from. All links mentioned in each episode are in the show notes found on the blog at realmenfeel.org. Now, let's get to it. Hello, and welcome to another edition of Real Men Feel. This is your host, Andy Grant. At any time in our lives, we can be overcome with emotion and fall into, patterns of anxiety or depression, and they can even lead to really the darkest places, and you can have suicidal thoughts, perhaps even make attempts. I've talked about my own experience with that many times in the past. I've had many guests come and openly talk about that, and that was really one of the missions of Real Men Feel, is to openly, authentically share the darkest of times so that others know they aren't alone, so that others know there is hope, right? So that everybody knows you can get through this, right? And I know that can be done because I've gotten through it, and many of my guests have too. And today we're going to be along that similar lines. I'm really excited to be talking to my guest today is a successful entrepreneur, childhood sexual abuse survivor, and author. Wow. It's Friday, folks. My guest today is Jesus Christ. My guest today is a successful entrepreneur, a childhood sexual abuse survivor, and author, Robert Imbeault. Welcome to the show, Robert.
Oh, thank you for having me.
Man, my tongue is not working today. So I kind of let the cat right out of the bag, and I want to give everyone just kind of a trigger warning. We're going to be talking about some heavy subjects. So we are going to talk about suicide and even suicide attempts. If you're contemplating suicide, if you really feel that dark place right now, stop listening, right? Take care of yourself, or reach out for help. In the United States, you can call 1-800-273-TALK. That's 8255, or you can text HOME to 741741. Outside of the United States, visit suicide.org for a complete list of lots of international numbers and support. But take care of yourself. We're talking about heavy, dark places because we aren't there currently. All right. And let me make sure. Robert, how are you feeling today?
Well, funny you ask, because I generally preface anything that I talk about by saying that right now, I'm looking through the lens of my best life, living a life of joy and happiness, and grateful for every single moment. So before we get into the dark stuff, I generally say that. So I'm great. How are you?
Cool. I'm good too. So even with the pandemic, you and your family, everybody's healthy and doing okay right now?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we're pretty good. I mean, I'm stuck with my favorite people in the world. So, and we have two young daughters. So it's super fine and fun, and we're trying to help where we can.
Cool. Now, as someone with a history of suicidal thoughts, has anything about perhaps some of the fear, the isolation, has anything about this been extra challenging for you in any way due to your history?
Only insofar as worrying about my friends that I know that were struggling before. So we can reach out, electronically. And one, was contemplating suicide recently. And luckily I took a course on how to recognize and talk about it and connect to help. That really, really helped. So I worry about a lot of, people in my community and in family, of course. So it's just a matter of, for me, myself, not, I'm pretty happy. I'm pretty stable. And having gone through this whole book thing has been tremendously helpful. But it's more worried about, my friends, family, community, and everyone, really.
So we'll just jump right into it. Many people write suicide notes. You actually wrote your book, Before I Leave You, with the intention of killing yourself once it was complete. Is that right?
Yeah, that's exactly right. Yeah, after a failed attempt, and just not to get graphic, but I crushed my windpipe and I couldn't speak, and I just sort of turned to writing, and the writing was a secret goodbye. And for those who have experienced it, you want to explain why death seems better than living, because it's explaining the pain, and like the pain is constant, it's chronic. I can't handle it anymore. So I really wanted to explain why. And I also wanted like from the practical aspect, I wanted to make sure the passwords got into the right hands. I was early stages of building what's becoming a pretty good company, and I had partners and I had staff and I had people that I didn't want to leave in a lurch, more than their good friends committing suicide. I just sort of just and this is what the title was: before I leave you, I have to get this stuff done, and write this letter. So yeah, that's how it started.
So it seems like a rather logical approach. Like, oh, well, here are my steps, and I've got to take care of this. And it, at what point during the writing process, or perhaps it wasn't even during the writing process, did you realize, you know what, I'm actually not going to try to kill myself? Or how did that
It was,
unfold?
I mean, during the descent, it's a series of rock bottoms. I turned to drugs and alcohol. In a, like leaving Las Vegas style, which is the story about. So I really wanted to just party my ass off and die. I also discovered ecstasy, which was amazing. Life is good for those few hours, and then worse the following few hours. Um, so, and I kept writing. Um, I think writing itself is a therapy, at least it was for me. I was able to be vulnerable without being vulnerable to someone else. So, I say the pages knew my words, and only the words knew how I felt. And that turned into more therapy. So I kept on doing it, and it healing crept in. And there were other things. I had a girlfriend at the time who I had brought down with me, but she brought us back out, through meditation and through other avenues. So these little branches like crabgrass growing up started to heal. And when I eventually shared what I was writing, it was my girlfriend at the time, now my wife, who said, you can share this and this could help people. And that's when it kind of turned into a book, an outward book. And everyone should write a memoir. Maybe not before the age of 40, which is an arbitrary number, but I think everyone should write a memoir, because the catharsis in writing down, being truthful, being raw, really accepting, how much of an asshole you were and why, and getting better. You're like, I was awful. I was an awful human being, and I accept that, and I'll own it. And now I'll get better. Now I'll be a better human being. I'll help people. And so writing just provided so much. It just, and it kind of was while I wasn't looking. I was like writing this, suicide letter essentially, and it turned into, it's like, actually, you're getting better now. You don't really want to die. And there's a series of epiphanies, but there is one moment not too far from you at Walden Pond, where I describe in the book, was kind of a big turnaround for me.
And how long from when you started writing to when it felt complete?
Till it probably about oh geez, writing. I mean, I started writing in the throes of
Right.
anguish, and I guess I was partying for the better part of 5 years, and it was another year or two after. So it was good 2 years of it being focused on making it a book,
Okay.
and turning it into a book.
So, all right. So that's what I wanted to get clarity on. So it wasn't just a weekend of like, oh, just rapidly regurgitating on paper. It was a long time, right? All right.
It
So,
was a very, very long time. Yeah, I wanted the writing to be good. I've always wanted, to be a writer, and I really wanted the writing to be good. My wife gifted me a memoir writing class, and it was a local award-winning author who was teaching it. And I shared my book, and she said, "Wow, I think this could be a really good book." She then became my editor, and proceeded to destroy the shit out of it, but made it better, made me better, because how I wrote was how I felt, and some things I didn't recognize, and she just sort of brought them to light and really considered. I'm like, wow, this is how my thinking works. William James once said, "I'll tell you what I'm thinking when I can write it down." Right? And because you really don't know what's in there sometimes. So yeah, it was a long, arduous, painful process.
so you mentioned before you started writing, there was an attempt that you ended up with a crushed windpipe.
Mhm.
Did anyone know about that?
No,
No. So
No,
you kept
no
that
one
secret from
knew.
everybody.
No
Yeah.
one knew that I wanted to end my life. Nobody
Yeah.
knew what was going on. There was a catalyst involved, like that something happened, and um, I hit it very well. And I turned to partying, right? So I'm high on drugs and alcohol, and so I'm living my best life. From the perspective of social media, I was like, "Wow, this guy's rolling. He's doing a really good job. He's loving life." But that was my mask.
Had had you had that mask since childhood? Were there depressive, suicidal thoughts at early ages, or only as an adult?
No, there was a longing to die. Just to get into, I'll get into it. I have to tell the backstory. I think just in the early stages of building this company, a memory resurfaces of being raped as an 8-year-old boy, and that's what sends me spinning. And I was married, to someone I adored, and it left me catatonic for a couple of days, and ultimately I just I couldn't deal with it. I couldn't deal with it at 8, which is probably why it kind of like was repressed somewhat. um, but um, I decided to end my life, left my wife, started doing drugs and alcohol, just partied and tried to spend all of my money just to get rid of it. No reason to live it, to have it. um, so that's how it started anyway. And that was when as soon as I left my wife, that's when the first attempt took place, and I had decided subsequent attempts as well.
And so, what age was that when you had that memory
30,
flash?
38. So
38.
it was 30 years.
Yeah.
And looking back, just to get back to circle back to your original question, looking back, it was always there. So it was, I had addictions to almost anything throughout my life. The biggest one was work. I was addicted to definitely workaholism, and built businesses, and was outwardly very successful, but my relationships were shit. I still wanted to die. I checked all the boxes of stuff, the house, the cars, all that stuff, but the longing to die never subsided. And then I realized why.
Yeah.
And that's something I only realized writing the book.
Yeah. Cool. Yeah. Your story resonates strongly with me and a lot of other men that I've talked to. So I was sexually abused at like age 5, and I didn't remember. I wasn't conscious of it till like age 20, and after
Right.
multiple suicide attempts, and finally, and for me, I was like, oh, so that's why. Oh, great, everything's all
Right.
set now. Did you have
Yeah.
that? Like when you went to, oh, I remember like my core event. So it shall be gravy. That's it.
Not so much exact gravy, but I mean, there's still a lot of work to do,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
I mean, and I realized it's not something you deal with and put away. It's something you integrate, but you can use that power for good, and like you are on your platform, right? Doing really important work, what you're doing. So um, you use it to your advantage, but it's still there. It's still shitty. You still look back at that 5-year-old or 8-year-old and say, "Fuck." How can someone do that? And then I I went to therapy too. I found someone that, and I interviewed a bunch of therapists, and I describe it in the book. I just was full of shit pretty much, and wanted to see if anyone would, call me on it. And one woman did. This woman with like 2 PhDs was, much, much smarter than I. She's like, this is really expensive. You're just gonna be full of shit the whole time. And I'm like, okay, well, I'm gonna keep her and decide to be as honest as possible. So and it was her to really help integrate all of that past into how that informs who I was and how it informs who I am. And I still do therapy now. She's since retired, but I have a new therapist helping me, because I'm a father of 2, and and a husband. I really want the good things to inform those roles.
Cool. Now, you've also had some high moments in your life. You've built businesses. You've met the Queen of England. You've been swimming with great white sharks. All these like exotic, cool things. During those times, could you appreciate them? Did they feel good, or was there always just this darkness in the background?
I think a lot of those, I mean, yeah, I went with a really good friend of mine. I had a bucket list, and he's like, well, let's just go do those things. We, went skydiving and swimming with great white sharks. But again, those were major distractions to looking within. And yeah, they felt great. I mean, yeah, I mean, it's adrenaline, the right molecules are probably, pumping. Like, I think they felt good in the moment. And yeah, meeting the Queen is a weird thing that I did through a charity organization that I was on the board of. So yeah, I mean, those things definitely felt good in the moment, but they were just like chasing that high.
Yeah.
Mhm. And
So you
that was
mentioned,
before I knew.
oh, okay, so you mentioned having a bucket list. So was it a traditional bucket list of things I want to do, or a bucket list before I die?
No, this is a bucket list. Like, yeah, I mean, it was just the things to do before I
Okay.
knew. Yeah, and yeah, no, the book was the real bucket list, I guess. This is things I need to do before I kill myself.
Mm.
Mhm.
You mentioned multiple attempts. Had you been someone that wrote notes and left messages for those attempts that did not succeed?
No, the first one, I didn't. I decided to start writing, and I was going to leave that. And I definitely, I thought of the idea of just sort of leaving it out and sending it to a publisher, or just leaving it with my lawyer or something like that. And the other attempts were, I was too high. I was just, and I was trying to overdose, and yeah. I describe one at EDC, one of the biggest raves in the world, and I was just trying, and something happened that ended the event abruptly, and then my friend recognized what I was doing. Like, it was just a culmination of events that prevented me from going through with it, it was crazy because they were outward. It wasn't me. And, I lost the bag of drugs in a sea of 50,000, and too, fucked up to find it, obviously. So it was, so all these other attempts, I didn't really leave any note. They were like, and I think people would have been shocked unless they found what I was writing.
Yeah. So in the moment, as kind of life is conspiring to keep you alive, could you accept that? Could you see it that way, or it's just like, oh, I'm an idiot and I can't even do this right, or like, how was
Yeah,
that?
no, yeah. Every time I failed was now I'm one of those. Either I'm incompetent, or this is a pathetic, call for attention, and I hated myself even more. And there, I was just frustrated. At that point, I was just frustrated, and like, they're physically carrying me out of the event, and I'm in the back seat of this car with this stuffed Care Bear, which I've written an essay about, um, and I'm waiting for my next opportunity. And I was just sort of like, as much as I could, because I wasn't as lucid as you can imagine, but I was just sort of like, I need to get more, and I want to finish the job. I'm trying to freak out and trying to, yeah, not draw attention to it.
So so you sound like you had a pretty extensive period of self-destructive behavior. Did anyone in your circle of friends or family see this as suicidal?
No, I think there were a few people. My sister was worried about me. My ex was actually worried about me, and but most people chalked it up to, oh, he's just indulging a little too much, and we'll step in if we see a problem, type thing. My ex actually reached out to a friend of mine, and he was just like, no, he's fine, don't worry about it. Like, I'm sure he'll do okay. He was kind of being like the friend to keep her out of my life, kind of being protective of me, but not knowing what was really going on.
You were consciously wishing you were dead.
Yeah.
And doing things to make that happen.
Mm-hmm.
Having lived through that, is there anything that you wish someone had said? Like, could someone have like pulled your? Was there a connection that could have stopped it earlier?
In the course I took to recognize it, the first thing is to say it out loud, right? And no one would ever say it out loud. I don't know if I would have been receptive. I don't think I would have been at that time. Maybe, I mean, the therapist did bring it up, and she had this whole thing with, every time you have these catastrophic thoughts, write down how you're feeling. And she was in support. If I wanted to do ecstasy, she's like, yeah, if you need to do it, do it. But before you do it, write down what you're thinking, what's leading you to this, which is part of her genius, right? You start doing that, you're like, okay, before I have to write this down for my fucking therapist, and I start writing this down. I'm like, oh, do I really want to take ecstasy right now? And and just like, it's not fun if I'm allowed, right? Like, so, a few times I didn't. I chose not to, and I just, either went to bed or had some wine or something. Um, so yeah, in those moments, that's I couldn't recognize what the source was.
Yeah. Cool. Yeah. There are so many parallels between your experience and my experience, and I'm sure
Mhm.
countless other men as well.
Mhm.
Um, Now that I've said that, I don't know why I said that.
Well, the big thing, like when I started doing research because I really wanted to understand repressed memory because, kid of the 80s, I didn't really respect it. I didn't really, I'm like, well, is that really a thing? And looking into the memory wars, and there was a whole, because it was a controversial topic back in the 80s and early 90s. And it culminated into what they call the memory wars. But they found that therapists were sometimes leading their clients down that road. That wasn't my experience. And I only talk about my experience in the book,
Yeah.
obviously, but I realized that the memory was there a little bit. Like I knew someone was in that room. I knew something didn't happen, or something happened that affected me that wasn't right. Because we know that, right? Intrinsically, we know as kids that this isn't right. We know that. And where was I going with this? Like, you
It's
got me.
spreading.
It's catchy.
Too many
um,
parallels.
yeah,
Yeah.
I'm just saying, I knew it informed who I was. Like
Yeah.
I saw, I have all my report cards, and I see, happy-go-lucky, responsive, enjoys being here, to unresponsive, daydreams, doesn't do his work, and it's just shocking to see these pairs of report cards.
Yeah. Yeah. So same thing. And so we'll go deeper here. Maybe it can help someone recognize it. So in hindsight, my mom knew something had changed in me right around age 5, and my
Mhm.
personality, my outgoingness really changed. So they just really started like licking my lips, this nervous anxiety. I would always have chapped lips. And it was about the same time as my parents got divorced. So they thought, oh, that's it. But it was at the time my parents were divorcing, a neighbor started molesting me. And I thought, again, I didn't know this at the time,
Mhm.
uncovered that I thought that if I told anyone about this, I would be the next man to be kicked out of the house. Like this
Mhm.
is the
Oh
pattern
wow.
that's happening in life. So I can't, no,
Mhm.
my mom's gonna know that I got to be a good boy, or I can't rock the
Right.
boat. Um, Later, when I remembered, I remember seeing things in the news too, like can't trust childhood memories, all this stuff. So
Mhm.
first I thought relief, then I was like, no, I'm wrong. I made this up. Oh, I'm just looking for an excuse. This really isn't it.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
when I was 30, I had myself hypnotized to see if I could prove that happened, and went back age 5, and I felt disgusting. I had more details of the room,
Mhm.
and I was like, oh my god, yeah, all right, yeah, this, all right, get me out of here. And it
Yeah.
took a long time. It was the only time I've ever been hypnotized. And they're like, okay, you're back. And I'm like, I feel freaking disgusting. Like,
Mhm.
am I really back? Like, it was gross. And she had to talk to me for like 40 minutes, just, what color is that lampshade? And just really helping me get
Right.
present and
Yeah.
just fill my senses like with
Mhm.
what's now. But yeah, so boy, I guess all the sort of, false memories, real memories, I guess there's truth in all sides, like
Mhm.
but yeah, it's a tremendous disservice to have anyone having a recollection, having that sudden
Mhm.
flash of memory of some abusive situation, that then we turn it and question
Right.
ourselves even more, and it's
Yeah.
another reason to beat ourselves up and think that we're a
Right.
loser and can't do anything right, and yeah,
Mhm.
so not
and
good, but
and part of us doesn't want it to be true,
yeah, yeah,
and for men especially,
yeah,
right?
oh yeah,
We definitely don't want it to be true when we look back at that. I describe the recovery as, I had a blurry old photograph, and then now I have a 4K full length movie, playing. Like, and I just, like you described, you can see the room, and I knew the smells, and I knew how I responded, and I didn't respect how I responded. Like all these awful memories that now that we have to reintegrate.
yeah.
Mhm.
And now I knew I wanted earlier. So in terms of you know in my own life, and in hearing your story and other people's, and people ask like, what could I've done to help? And you can't help anyone that doesn't want to be helped yet.
Mm.
and people tried to intervene with me, and I was a cutter in school, and guidance counselors would see like scars, like, oh, I was just making a sandwich, I messed up,
Mhm.
and
Mhm.
I was a good student, so people wanted to believe my lies.
Right.
And
Mm.
especially for guys, your friends were asked like, hey, is Rob okay? I'm like, yeah, he's fine. And I think a lot of us, like, nobody wants to see that darkness in them. So to see it in someone else that they care about, it almost like, oh, that
Right.
potential is also in me then too. Right.
Huge. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So really, really important. Um, Honestly, if you fear for a loved one, and now I just because I'm researching it because I'm getting the questions a lot and taking the courses, like I really lean on safe space. Just giving someone a safe space, to do what they need to do, but know that you're there. You're not judging. You have unconditional love, and you're here when they're ready. Saying the words out loud was a big one, and you stay. And those three things were there for me from my girlfriend, and we broke up, and she wrote this, very, very long email like, okay, you were a drug addict, you're having trouble, you need to get help. um, and but I still love you, and I know that what we went through is not conducive of who you can be or who you are, type thing. And she stayed, and she stayed through the worst of it. And then, like, I cheated before I broke up, and then burn bridges. That's what we knew. That's what we do. And hearing those words and hearing you were an addict, there's sort of like, okay, I didn't want to see that, but those words were out loud, saying that, are you contemplating suicide? Now it's there. You have a yes or no. And yes, okay, let's go get help. No, are you sure you have a safe space? That sort of thing. And I jokingly asked my wife recently, I'm like, why the hell did you stay? Like, I mean, we had a lot of fun, but I treated her poorly, and she's like, that's what you do when with someone you love, you stay. And rewind to her upbringing. She lived with her parents. I have permission to tell this story. um, she lived with her parents, who had group homes that took care of teenagers, problem teenagers. And what they needed most is for people to say that we're here and we're going to stay no matter what you do. And that's how you heal. And so it was just kind of intrinsic with her. She stayed, and she became my safe space.
Yeah.
And she knew the worst of it because she was there.
Wow. So she was truly raised to
Yeah,
to thrive
to
and
do
survive
that.
and
Yeah.
help your relationship. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's amazing. That's yeah. I mean,
I lucked
wow.
out.
Yeah. More than that, yeah. You're very, very blessed to have that, and because not everybody does have that. But I
And
want to stress.
and I'm sorry for interrupting. And I didn't do a rehab or a 12-step program because I don't think I would have been as strong, or to be that vulnerable. But I had my wife, so I think I checked all the boxes, of the 12-step program. Mhm.
So was it just a final when you finally got clean? Was it just I've had enough? And just this decision? No.
Hell no.
Okay.
um, I We weren't together. I asked my wife to marry me, and we were high. She's like, really? And she was even living in a different city. I'm like, yes, let's just do it. And so we did it. We got married 2 weeks later in Vegas. Got high again, and but in order for her to say hi, she's like, we're going to slow down and then eventually stop this partying. We're going to sell the penthouse downtown. We're going to move to the suburbs. We're going to have a nice little house. We're just going to calm down. And I'm like, okay, we'll do all that. And then we did. And we did all that. And then we slowed down, but it was hard to slow down, right? It was going from one step forward to like 7 steps back. And then, okay, well, let's take another step forward. And maybe this time only 5 steps back. And then we slip again, but we move forward, constantly move forward, improving our nutrition, getting off my ass because I was 70 pounds heavier. Um, really doing a deep dive into spirituality and meditation. And then we'd slip, we'd go out and party, and then, oops, there goes 4 days. But then it was less and less. And, we lived in the suburbs, so less people would come to visit us. And then one morning she just sort of said, I think I'm pregnant. I'm like, okay, zero tolerance. And we haven't looked back.
Yeah. And how long has that
And
been?
that's been 3.5 years.
Oh,
Yeah.
cool. So you mentioned a couple of times of what finally was enough is enough, and I'm going to reclaim my life, and I am going to live. It sounds like you mentioned it was a series of like rock bottoms, and
Yeah.
one harder rock bottom than others. So like, so it was there one. What was the series or one thing that finally said, "All right, I've got to make a change. I'm gonna live, and I've got to make a change to make that happen."
Yeah. Well, I mean, there's two. There's one when I went to Walden with my girlfriend. I had decided I wanted to go alone, but she wanted to come. She tagged along. We weren't together, but she was like, "Can I come?" I'm like, okay. So we drove for 6 days, and we drove down to Walden, and as I'm driving, you have a lot of time to contemplate, right? And I actually drove back to the building where I was raped, and it was gone. It was gentrified. So this like shitty apartment building was gone, and so it was really strange. I'm like, this is where it happened, And I describe it in my book. My ground zero now has a Starbucks. Perfect. And we continue driving, and I was just like, if I'm driving, I'm doing something. That means I'm not get busy dying, right? To quote Stephen King, I was trying to find beauty, and Walden blew me away. And there's like, one of my best friends in high school turned me on to Thoreau, and civil disobedience in Walden. And so I was like, yeah, I'm gonna go check that out. And sitting in his cabin, and we listened to his audiobook, and yeah, literally just bathing in that pond. I'm like, I really, really want to live. Like, I wouldn't be doing this if I didn't want to live. And I'm I had written a lot in for that goodbye, which was almost like an apology, a series of apology essays. Um, and that's when I decided to share what I was writing and what I was planning with my girlfriend. And that was the big one. The second one was obviously being pregnant. I know it's no longer just about me. And people talk a lot about purpose, and there it is. There you have it. So it sort of fell into my lap.
Cool. So that moment of thinking to yourself, realizing I really want to live, had was that the first time you thought that?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, there were times when I was just high in the clubs, and with surrounded by all my best friends that sadly disappeared. That was on, in for the ride, and probably on their own journeys. Where like, I really love these people. I really love, I'm living life, and they're telling me, how great it is and how much fun we're having. It is all very much manufactured.
Mm,
It was very much drug induced.
mm. Do you have? I'm gonna say real. Well, let's say real. Do you have real friends now?
I do. Yeah. Yeah. Friendships are difficult for me. I've always had trouble with men. I've always had trouble having friendships. I never really knew how to have friends. Having acquaintances and business partners, which are great. Um, I had, you know, I could relate more to girls, probably because I was less intimidated. And even now, I worry. I just see men and I don't trust them instantly. I just sort of have that instinct. So having friends is hard, but I do have them, and the ones I do, uh, I dig deep. I want to be my authentic self, and a big part of my journey was how full of shit I was my entire life, right?
Mm,
Like Olympic level liar. I just was full of shit, and I had to remember what lies I told to whom, and that's a lot of mental power, and to shed that and to be 100% authentic, real, um, is so freeing. So yeah, I kind of jump topics. It's what I do, and so yeah, the friends I do have, I keep them close because we have those deep conversations. So the ones that stick and are interested, and doing the deep work, not work, but even discussing philosophically or intellectually. I have one of my good friends that I ostracized during that downfall, that I reached out to only maybe a couple of months ago. and he was one of my best friends, and we've reconnected. And he, the reason we didn't be, we stopped being friends weren't the reasons I thought. They thought we both had our own shit. They were both equally my fault though. So, but and he's one of those, intellects that we can talk about almost anything, but we can call each other a douchebag at the same time.
Yeah. Cool.
So I love that. I appreciate that.
Yeah. I mean, it only makes sense that, again, how do I make friends? If you've always been living behind a mask, if you've always been altering your own feelings, you've been covering them all up, it's been fake Robert interacting with people. So yeah, I mean,
and that's the life context I created with partying, right? I mean, I'm going out getting bottles and people come. There's free alcohol, there's free real estate, there's beautiful girls. Like, though, that's the life context. So trying to stop that means I'm giving up friendships either I thought were real, or I knew weren't. And if you know what I mean.
Yeah, and I really wanted to ask that. So even in the moment during those times, like for myself, when I was drinking a lot and my house would be the party place, and I would end up depressed and suicidal, like after every party, like, oh, they're just using me. No one's really my friend. Were you having those thoughts during the time, at the moment?
Yeah. I did amass a really good crew at the time where some were equally or more successful and bringing, contributing more in various ways. And I did make some good friendships that way. Then I destroyed those friendships in my behavior.
So it's amazing to me with kind of the highlights of the lowlights as you're describing them, that you could be successful, that you could build a business and keep things functioning. How did your life stay on the rails?
Well, I mean, the downtime. So when I'm not partying, the Mondays were the worst, obviously. Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursdays, I no longer have to look at what I just did, and I certainly don't have to look within. So, if I can get, 60, 80 hours out of those days, then I would, that's all I would do. I would just work. And, obviously not denying that I was becoming less and less effective. At first, I would only do drugs in Las Vegas, and I didn't want to be seen because I was on boards of charities. And then it trickled into Montreal, which is a 2-hour drive from Ottawa, and a big party place. And then it eventually came, I started to go out with club owners here and then wanting to party here. And so it was just the drug use just increased to the point where I was ineffective, and I thought I was hiding it well. But meanwhile, my partners are hiring people to do my work, right? Like this is, and so like they were both concerned for me personally, as well as, we're growing this business, which is now a very large business. So.
Cool. So you still have the business that you built during the rocky times. It still exists. It made it.
Oh yeah, it's done really well. It's probably worth $500 million right now. I sold some shares and I retired in 2017, and pretty much sold enough, just sold everything, all my house and cars and stuff, and then we went traveling with our daughter for 10 months in Southeast Asia. And that's where I wrote the book. That's where I really focused down. I got a couple hours every day to go, thanks to my wife, to work on the book.
Cool. So what sort of things do you do today to maintain your mental health?
I really did a deep dive into Buddhist practice, which is, Southeast Asia is a lot of Buddhist countries. I meditate. We did nutrition certifications, so we would just eat really, really well, get off my ass and work out. Even now, we have like a storage space, and I used to go to the gym, and now I just sort of bought a bench, bought some weights because I need to do something definitely for the mental health. And I continue to write. So I'm doing a lot of personal essays, submitting it to various, getting them published in newspapers. I really want to get published in the New York Times. It's one of my stretch goals. And working on another book, because actually there's 3 other ideas. One of which is very germane to what we're talking about, which is complex trauma. There's a gap between how trauma is diagnosed and how it's treated. and it's based on this DSM guide. Uh, and that defines how insurance covers it, both in the US and Canada. And if there is no complex trauma, and like childhood sexual abuse, um, yeah, within the family or not, you can get treated differently. And on the other side, there's these amazing new treatments now. We have EMDR, which is something that's been really effective with me. We have yeah, neurofeedback training. And there's sound therapy, there's talk therapy, obviously. We have so much and so many different ways we can treat these traumas, which is definitely relates to suicide, because that's where it ultimately drives. There's psychedelics. I'm just I'm about 4 or 5 books into psychedelics and very exciting about that potential. So really reconciling how we diagnose to how we treat is something. We need to change laws. We need to get into that DSM guide so we can properly treat people who struggle with mental health.
So you mentioned a few times, covering up and not know how to have friends, not how to be authentic, and especially as a man, it makes all navigating this even more difficult. So how did you learn what it means to be a man, and whatever that means to you?
I mean, I witnessed a lot with my father, and which, the good and the bad. So, mom left dad when I was 18 months and there was abuse there. But I would go see him. I'd live 6 hours away, but I'd see him on summers and Christmas. And, I revered him. I thought, he's a successful businessman, and very, very well spoken, very intelligent. But, in the background, which I don't know if I saw it consciously or subconsciously, but, there was abuse, there was cheating, and that's my role model, right? So, and the rest would be television, right? So that would inform, because there was nobody to sit me down to say this is what a man is, but it's all going to be television, right? Definitely Sesame Street child. So and yeah, all those 80s and 90s shows, I just watch cop dramas. I'm like, they're either either the assailants or the alcoholic police officers, detectives. So yeah, that's essentially where I learned how to be a man before all this.
Is what you absorbed and modeled, did it serve you in any way, or did it set you up for kind of the worst experiences that you've had?
Definitely the worst. Definitely the worst, because I didn't know how to navigate relationships, and I was never abusive or anything, but well, not physically, but I definitely think like my humor, just very disparaging, very anti-feminine, right? Just sort of seeing women as lesser. Like, I think that was just in my mindset, and I hated that. I hate that, and I hate that now. And as I became more aware of it, I'm definitely more sensitive to it. And I live with a house full of women now, so I definitely have some good referees to call me out on it. And I certainly don't want to be that way as a father, and I want my daughters to be empathetic and fierce, and have their own strengths, so and empowered. So I think it definitely defined how I entered relationships, but I always kept kept most of my relationships, at arm's length.
Cool. So, based on your experience so far, raising your daughter and your experience being raised by parents, what do you think makes a great dad?
For me, I mean, I go back to safe space, right? If my daughters come out, as gay or trans or whatever, they are going to know that they have a safe space. They know I'm going to love them unconditionally and support them. And I'm going to let them fall, but be there when they get up, right? Like, I'm not going to trip them, but, because I want them to overcome their own adversity, and adversity has a way of finding everyone. But I want to know that, they can rely on me. my eldest is 3, and like even when she was growing up, was trying to like climb on this couch, and I sit back and watch her climb, and the worst she can fall is maybe less than a foot. And my mother walked into the room. She's like, "You gonna help her?" I'm like, "No, she'll get it," And she fell, and then she got up and she tried again and she fell, and I stopped my mom and like watch, and then she did it. I don't know, physics didn't make sense to me, but she did it, and the look of pride on her face. It's like she did it. I'm like, yeah, you definitely did it. Have a little celebration. That's the kind of dad I like to be. I like to make sure that she'll get things on her own. And now at 3, she wants to do everything on her own. I want to do that myself. Okay, let's do it.
Cool. Cool. Is there a particular habit, program, book, technique that helped you that you want to share with more people?
The program I just took on the suicide recognition is called Assist, and there was a subcategory, and it's actually $20 right now, and it's usually much more. I'll send you the link. I don't know if you want to put it in the show notes as well.
Sure.
And that helps tremendously. It was actually really, really well produced. There's video, and and you interact video, and like there's text and stuff. You see how you can raise those things in conversation, and how you connect, and what you can recognize, and how to recognize things, and then ultimately how you connect to people who can help. That's a huge one, and it was I forget what it was called. It was a part of the Assist program though. I love reading books like memoirs on addiction. And when I decided to write mine, I obviously went out and read as much as I could. Wild by Cheryl Strayed, and Portrait of the Addict as a Young Man. Like Theo Fleury, he's a famous NHL player, one of the best of all time. He wrote, a really important book in the 90s that he got raped 150 times when he was, rising up to to the NHL. And that was sort of, very, very blunt, very important book, for me anyway, I'm in Canadian context. And so, there's those types of books. Not really sure with programs like you. On my website, I have a list of every single number with every municipality in North America if you need help. So that's there as well. Cool. I like that you did that. You actually started that with that conversation. I love that. Yeah. But yeah, those books, there's a lot of books I can rhyme off. I don't want to give too many.
Is that the type of book during your wild days, would you read those books, or was it only while you were preparing your own?
Only while I was preparing my own.
Okay.
Well, that's not true. I think subconsciously, I think I read Wild before I decided to make this a book, or maybe when I was playing with the idea. But there are always those interesting stories, and my book, it really gets into the descent, but as much is the healing, because there is no one thing. I think it's a series of things, right? There's small fixes, and that you make habits that become more important. Meditation was a big catalyst for me. Nutrition was a big thing for me. I often say cinnamon changed my life, because just replacing the sugar I was drinking in my coffee with cinnamon, so I, avoid the sugar, and I'm adding something, good. I'm actually nourishing myself rather than harming myself, which is a whole big thing. So I make these small little improvements, and then those will, snowball into big ones.
Yeah, I find that's frustrating in my experience. Anytime I'm interviewed about my past or the books I've written, people are like, what's the one thing that turns you around? Like, nothing. It isn't that. If it was just, this magic bullet sort of scenario, then it'd be easier to find, and right. Someone would find it, tell everybody, and the issue with suicide would be over. But it doesn't play out like that.
Yeah, it's very, very true. And you know what? Someone asked me that outright. I don't want to call anyone out, but someone did ask me early on in the process of this book, and they're like, I really struggled, and they shared their trauma with me, and which is difficult in and of itself. And you thank them for sharing. And what is the one thing that helped? I'm like, it's and it kind of caught me off guard. I didn't really know how to answer it, and then I just sort of got into it. It's not one thing. You got to treat yourself with love.
Right. Good. So now we've made it clear that it's not one thing, but is there one thing you wish more men knew about?
We can use male machismo to our advantage. We can use our ego to our advantage. The big thing that men have, like we can be stoic. Stoicism has a place. Has a great place, but not to give a shit what anyone thinks is a good thing, in that I like Katy Perry music. I don't give a shit what anyone thinks. I like, I'll dress like a princess with my daughter. I don't care what anyone thinks, right? Because it's about my daughter at that point. Like all those I guess things, picadillos associated with male toxicity. All the we can own that. We can just be ourselves. What are your thoughts on that Gillette commercial on male toxicity?
Oh, I thought it was great. It didn't bother me at all.
Yeah,
we had a whole show.
too.
We had a panel discussion on it. Yeah.
You did? Okay,
Yeah.
because it was controversial.
Yep.
I found later, and for me, I'm like, no, I think it's really important. Those messages were
Yeah.
really important. How we
So,
raise our boys is a really,
yeah.
really important thing.
Some men, the people that got upset about it, felt like it was saying men are toxic.
Mhm.
But it was, no, it's like, can we do better? It wasn't saying, hey, you're all horrible, you better do better. It was like,
Yeah,
can we do better than these examples we're showing? And yes,
yeah,
we can.
yeah,
It's
yeah,
that simple. Yeah, I didn't take it as a personal affront, like, how dare you, razor company, judge me? But some
no,
people did. That's what it seemed
yeah.
to be. But
It's amazing. I'd love to drill down in some of the psychology behind the people that were, because what I read, I'm like, well, that person, what he's complaining about, he's projecting a little bit. So I think there's something there. There's a source to that. Again, I suppose people like us who, we see the good. I think we're two optimists talking right now.
yeah,
So I guess we're projecting as well. But
yeah. And again,
um,
I won't speak for you, but I have not always been this way.
right.
So they
Oh
might
yeah,
have,
for sure.
if that had aired and I was 18, like, you freaking asshole company, what do you think? I don't know what my
Yeah.
reaction would have been, but
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, out in the clubs early, we're looking for girls. We're looking for girls, and we objectify them appropriately. That's how it was, and I hated that. Some of the stuff that I've said or done make me cringe. That's I that's not how I want to be. And I forgot where I read it, but I believe that we're secretly looking for permission to be better. I really believe that. Like, I think you have your show. There's a really good example. I have my book, and the way we live our lives. I really think that a lot of us are just looking to be like, what, I don't really want to treat this woman like, I don't want to go out. If I'm going to go out, I want to be with my friends. I just want to have fun, have a few drinks, maybe don't drink anymore, or do whatever, and have a good conversation. I don't want to be like, how do we angle that group of 20 somethings? Like, that's not interesting to me.
yeah,
But to say that in the moment, surrounded by 4 or 5 guys that are flexing and stuff, and
yeah,
like, and I boxed for 14 years. Like, that was like, that's the manliest thing you can probably do, and is to get punched in the face, which I did a lot. So I let that go. And now I'm pretty much a pacifist. Like, I definitely adopted Buddhist practice. Like, I don't even watch violent movies. Like, I'm probably, 29 Marvel movies behind, I think. So I think I'm very, like, it's not interesting to me. So I give myself permission to, like, I want to watch what I want to watch,
yeah,
and whether you deem it feminine is not my concern.
yeah. No, I think that's the lure, the power of the notion of the man box. And so
Yeah,
and I've had the experience too. Like, I'm doing something that I feel conditioned I'm supposed to do. I don't even like it. Why am I doing this?
yeah,
But I'm going to do it
yeah,
because it's that training. I don't want to be judged as different or other, or
right.
not enough, not a man. All these sort of things that we're running through our heads all the freaking time.
Mhm.
until
Yeah.
that's part of the title of the show, until you realize that no, be, I'm a man. Whatever I do means being a man.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
these
Exactly.
feelings, these thoughts, like this is life. This is my emotions are telling me, yeah, this isn't for you. This
Mm.
I'm not feeling good doing this, so do fucking something else. Like wake
Yeah.
up. Yeah,
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah. Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah. That's exactly. I think it's wired in. We don't want to be ostracized from the tribe, but we can choose our tribe now. So
yeah, yeah,
so we can
cool.
we can be our own tribe.
Awesome, awesome. Um, in the process of writing the book or everything since it's come out, uh, what are you proud of?
um, when so I talk a lot. Uh, when I read Theo Fleury's book, I actually reached out to him. He has like a website you can reach out. So I had a one-on-one. He did like an hour and a half FaceTime with me. It was awesome, and he warned me of a few things, all of which came to fruition. Is say, people are going to read it. People are going to share with you their trauma, and you'll have the good with the bad with that. So be prepared for that because that's a trauma for you. How you respond can or cannot be or won't be a trauma for them. And another big thing was how many people will come at you, and like the sheer prevalence and overwhelming feeling that you can't help everyone. And so having that conversation, this was months before the book came out. I'm just so grateful that he told me those things, because I did a pre-release with 200 people, and 30% responded by sharing with a trauma. And it was so, and this is friends and family, so it's people I knew. um, and I didn't know, like I just sort of like I entered a men's group, which helps as well, to help people learn how to share and how to respond. And I miss those guys. Because we can't meet because it's a pandemic. But that how I've been able to respond and how I have been able to prevent a suicide, I have been able to turn what I've written into some good. I wrote an essay in my men's group. Actually, I had shared. It was the week before the book was about to come out, and I was the first to do the sharing. We've been meeting for weeks, and we lead up to it. Thank God, because we got to know each other, whatever. And I shared first, and then I also shared. Listen, all my stories coming out. This is the book, and I gave them all a copy to read. And the next week, an older gentleman he was going to share that week, and he'd been holding on to something for 50 years, and something that he never told anyone except his wife and his therapist, and he was encouraged to do the men's group. He shared, and at the end of it, he turned to me and looked me right in the eyes. It's like, I could not have done this sharing thing if it wasn't for your book. And I didn't know what to do with it. I just, immediately started crying, and was just like, thank you, Rob. And I wrote an essay about that feeling, because there's that old, cliche, if it can help one person, it would have been worth it. So, but it did, and it was.
Yeah.
So I think I'm most proud of how it's actually been able to help. And I'm reading. People say don't read your reviews, but I'm reading my reviews, and they're all positive, and it's how people, it's helped some people, and I'm definitely the most proud of that. That's why I wrote it.
Yeah. Yeah. I find in men's groups and day-to-day life, especially true for men, that first guy to break down the barrier, to be authentic, to speak some truth for them,
Mhm.
always met with me too.
Yeah,
Right. Yeah.
yeah,
Like silence kills.
yeah.
So
It
the
really does.
bravery to not be silent
Hmm.
is just so well received.
Yeah,
And yeah, and I had that thought over a decade ago too. If I can just, if my share my shitty experiences and I help just one person, it's all worth it.
yeah,
And true, but when you do that, you help so more than one person. And
yeah,
that's it's not an ego trip. It's not, but like, no, you're that ripple effect. Like
yeah.
you being open and honest is a ripple effect that helps so many people, and
Hmm.
a tiny minority of which we'll get back to and let you know.
Yeah,
But yeah, you're
absolutely.
helping lives nonstop once you share your authentic life.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And for my experience anyway, and this may be true with you, and hopefully your listeners, once you do start sharing, people thank you.
Mhm.
People call you brave and courageous.
Yeah.
That's another pill to swallow, right? We have to, and I took that to therapy, and my therapist is like, you can integrate the good
Yeah.
too, right? Don't just integrate the bad, let's integrate the good and be okay with that. So,
Yeah.
and definitely, because you mentioned ego trip, just sort of accepting praise as well as criticism, with gratitude and humility.
Yeah. I mean, we all have, it's Panache Desai was on a show a few weeks earlier, and he talked about the commonality amongst all human beings is this core belief that we're not good enough. And so once you stop drinking and drugging and wanting to die, and then people tell you you're amazing, oh, that's still not good enough. We'll come back in another way. Like, no, please. And we have resistance to praise. We have resistance to, we want to be our true authentic selves, and there's still all this residue of when someone sees that you still want to shrink back a little bit.
Yeah. Our greatest fear is that we are powerful beyond measure. Yeah.
Right. Yep.
Love that
line.
Yeah.
And it's true. It's
so
totally true. And that's why people work hard to bury it with sex, with drugs, with work, with it. Every addiction is to cover up how much light you have, how much power you have, how you can impact people. Yeah.
Yeah. That's why I turned to Buddhism, really, because, and it's funny because I was brought up Catholic and then recovered from that, and it was an angry atheist for a very long time, and turned to meditation as utilitarian. Hey, it helps me sleep and helps me not do drugs. And then like Buddhist practice is like, you have this, everybody has this perfect Buddha nature, inner Buddha nature, which no matter what you've done in your life, you have a perfect person in there, a perfect soul in there. And then in studying that, reading Thich Nhat Hanh, living Buddha, living Christ, and it's turned back to like Christianity, and it's how that you can become your best self through any faith. So it's kind of circled back to a Western thought, but that's what drew me in, is that inner light. I'm like, because it's great to see yourself as that, but you can hold yourself accountable. You don't have to worry about anything else. So to the good and the bad.
Cool. Awesome. I really appreciate you being alive and sharing your experiences, writing the book. I know it is not easy, and I know it's a transformational process. So congratulations on coming through everything you've come through.
Thank you.
Rob, what's the best way people can get in touch with you, find out what you're up to, get themselves a copy of the book?
Well, before I say that, thank you for your show, your platform, and all the work you're doing. It's really, really important. So thank you. The website is beforeileaveyou.com. It was originally my name, but a lot of people can't spell the Rob Imbeault and let alone pronounce it right. But beforeileaveyou.com goes to the website, and then all my socials are up there. I'm not on Instagram because it gives me anxiety, so just Twitter and Facebook. Almost everything I post on Facebook is public, so that's all. It may be boring to most people, but So that's where I am.
Awesome. So we'll have links in the show notes at realmenfeel.org. We'll get a link to Rob's book. We'll get a link to every book he mentioned that helped him along his journey as well, and links to, again, more suicide hotlines and help if that's where you are, and even just to have that, know where to find it and share it with other people, right? No one gets out of this alive, but you don't have to get out of it early. Right? Really don't.
Well put.
Yeah. Cool.
Now let's just surf it in.
Yeah. I mean, make this ride last as long as it can, because it's the only one you're going to have. Right. Yeah. So we can all do better, be better, and trust our feelings. Trust it's interesting. I was going to say, trust those thoughts in your head, but not every thought in your head is your thought. And just because you think it doesn't mean it's true. So it's navigating what thoughts serve me, what impulses serve me, and what is just self-destructive and is just the lie, and it's that darkness. And again, I'm glad you came through it. I'm glad I came through it. I'm glad we can both help other people come through it. So thanks again, Rob. Thanks for everyone listening. Wherever you're discovering Real Men Feel, give us some light, give us some love, give us a share, a comment, some feedback, subscribe. And until next time, as always, be good to yourself. Thank you for listening to Real Men Feel. contact us at realmenfeel@gmail.com. Learn more about Andy Grant at theandygrant.com. Please subscribe to this podcast and leave a review on Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Spotify, TuneIn, or wherever you are discovering Real Men Feel.